Hello students, this is Professor McDermott with, at long last, your video introduction to Module 5, and I do apologize for the delay. I gave all 7 of my classes exams, and I've been somewhat swamped with the grading of them, but now I'm starting to get caught up. I've also graded your post for Module 4. For Module 5, our chairs are Reva Ewing for Group 1, Latashia Metz for Group 2, and Brandon Spurley for Group 3. So chairs, if you're unsure about what's involved in being a chair, please shoot me an email. I'll be happy to clear that up. And the deadline for your initial posts for Module 5 will be Thursday, October the 6th at 11:59. So I hope all of you will make your 3 initial posts for the 3 questions by the end of the day on Thursday. Now let's recap your discussions for Module 4, and I'm afraid this is going to be quite lengthy, but it has to be to do justice to your really good discussions. Group 1 read part of John Locke's 2 treatises on government, and at the beginning of their selection, Locke talks about the family and its relevance to society. And Nicholas, I think you hit the nail right on the head with your post on this subject. You said, I believe Locke was giving an example of how a family is structured to underscore his belief in how a government should be structured. He said that both the mother and father have equal importance in the way the household is run. They have different jobs, but one could not do it by themselves, basically. He believed that government should not have one absolute ruler. It should be different individuals with different responsibilities that should run the government. And I think you're absolutely right, Nicholas. Locke really emphasizes the importance of the mother alongside the father, because in that way he undermines the claims of absolute monarchs to have total authority over their peoples, whom they often saw as their family and saw themselves as the dad. But by saying that the mom has equal authority with the dad, Locke's opening the way for government to be based on community, more than just one individual. And he goes on to talk about what it means to come of age. And Reva, you stated this very well. The Bible states that children are to obey their parents. Locke used this analogy for the government being the parent and the child under age 21 were the people being governed. A child under the age of 21 is less likely to know his own mind. After the child is over the age of 21, both the parent and the son are free. When the citizen can prove he can handle his freedom, then he is considered free. So what Locke's saying is that when we're children, we are under the governance of our parents, but when we mature and grow, then we are free individuals, and we should be treated as such. Government should no longer treat us like the parents. And this was an argument that was very dear to the American founding fathers. They often said that once we were colonies, we were like children, serving the mother country and obeying her, but now we've come of age. It's time for us to be independent and free, like adults. Very good. So other members of the group really ran with these arguments and did a great job with them. Question 2, you pointed out correctly that Locke believes all government should be based on consent, the consent of the governed. And this phrase is quoted in the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson. It was also very dear to the founding fathers, that law and government should be based on the consent of the people. And in practical terms, that meant that the majority should generally rule. Question 3, I asked whether Locke believed that the 3 natural rights, life, liberty, and property, carried over from the state of nature into the state of society after people made a social contract and formed a government. I think, Jack, you expressed this very well. Locke's argument is that government is the only way for people to truly be free. Without society and laws, people live in fear of being harassed and invaded by others. The restrictions that laws create are meant to keep people in check so that everyone can enjoy life, liberty, and property, the natural rights. The balance is the hard part, setting enough restrictions to guarantee natural rights for everyone without going overboard. Different people have different opinions about where that balance lies. But the takeaway here is that, yes, Locke did believe that the purpose of government was to protect people's natural rights, life, liberty, and property. But group two, your thinker, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the Swiss political theorist, had very, very different opinions about society and government. Rousseau's very different in that he does not believe that people get to keep their natural rights once they have formed the social contract and consented to create a government. Now, group two, I really like the way that you grappled with this in your posts. And it is very hard for us Americans to wrap our minds around this because we are accustomed to believe that the purpose of government, as Locke said, is to protect our natural rights. But you came to the conclusion that, yes, Rousseau did really mean that individuals have to surrender all their rights to the general will of society. Rousseau sees the general will of society as the ruler of society. And people have to surrender all their rights to enjoy the protection of the general will. Salona, you pointed out one potential problem with this. You said, I don't believe it is worth it. Rousseau assumes that everyone is going to have the same decision and doesn't really account for diversity. Even though there isn't a single tyrannical leader, only the majority choice is reflected, therefore oppressing the minorities. And that was a significant problem with Rousseau's theory. We'll talk a little more about this later. I then asked about the general will, whether it really made sense to have this concept as the ruler of a society. Justin, I liked your comment. I honestly do not believe this will work. As a society now, there are different subcultures and beliefs. Not everyone thinks or does things the same way. There is no way that people as a whole could agree to a common interest. I just do not see it happening. I would think by doing this, it would cause a constant battle within society greater than it already is. Well, I think here again we see that we Americans are individualists. We're very much in the Lockean tradition. And Rousseau is coming from a different tradition where the needs of the community are paramount over the needs of individuals. Finally, on question 3, Group 3 discussed Rousseau's statement that if someone does not want to go along with the decision of the general will, he should be forced to be free. The group had a really vibrant discussion of the meaning of this, whether it meant simply obeying the law or if it meant something else. The chair, Schuyler, expressed the group consensus very well, I thought. He said, quote, I do not believe that anyone can be forced to be free, because many different cultures and religions have different views on what being free actually is. A person cherishes many aspects of freedom different than others, so forcing someone to be free seems to be only telling them how they should live, and that the way you're living is more correct or better than they are, and it should change, end quote. So once again, this goes against our grain as Americans, and I think in the difference between Locke's and Rousseau's political philosophies, we see here the difference I pointed out in the lecture between the Anglo-American Enlightenment and the French Enlightenment. That in turn led to the very great differences between the American and the French revolutions. Moving on to Group 3, they had the Prussian philosopher Immanuel Kant in his very important essay, What is Enlightenment? Kant starts out also by talking about childhood in a way, and he says that in order for people to emerge from their nonage, which means their childish immaturity, they must dare to know if they want to enter into enlightenment. And you had a very interesting discussion of this. Caitlin had an excellent post on this point. The process of enlightenment seems so difficult because so many people are either late maturing or never want to mature. Many people want to take the easy way out and never have any responsibility. Kant stated that laziness and cowardice are some of the reasons why people remain minors. They do not want to get up and grow up. If you always leave your responsibilities in someone else's hands, then you will never learn the responsibilities themselves. As Kant said, when someone puts all their responsibilities on someone else, then they do not know any different because it is just like, quote, second nature to them, end quote. I feel that Kant seems to think that the public or society as a whole prevents enlightenment because you will always do what you're used to and the normal. Well, in today's time, laziness and cowardice is the normal. And it's interesting that many of you seem to think that even now, 300 years after the Enlightenment, that in a way we're still struggling to get out of our childish immaturity and be truly enlightened. On the second question, Kant says the necessary condition for enlightenment is freedom, which led the group into a very thoughtful discussion of the meaning and limits of freedom, one which led nicely into their third question on whether too much freedom in a society can actually damage enlightenment, as Kant believed. Sandy put it well: if the society is given too much freedom, not everyone would use the freedom appropriately. They would take advantage of the opportunity of freedom. If they are given a small amount of freedom, then they can use it to slowly learn to become independent and obey at the same time. They could think on their own a little bit more. Too much freedom could lead to chaos, especially if not everyone chooses to follow enlightenment, end quote. And I think you see that in the French Revolution, how in a way too much sudden freedom or too much sudden upheaval led to chaos and ultimately led to a dictator, Napoleon, taking over, as we'll see in this coming module. I'll only briefly summarize the Age of Revolution discussions in the interests of time. Group 1 had the French Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen. The document states that government should protect people's rights, but there is a big catch. Rights disappeared whenever people violated a law made by the National Assembly. As opposed to our system, where our rights are enshrined in the Bill of Rights, which are very hard to change, the French National Assembly could make new laws at will that affected people's rights. The group had an interesting discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of this. On the plus side, it enabled the French revolutionary government to deal effectively with serious social problems, but more negatively, it could and did result in a loss of freedom. Group 2 had a document by the Marquis de Condorcet, a French nobleman who was involved in the French Revolution and who believed it would radically transform human life. William, you had an excellent post on Condorcet. The three main hopes for the human race that Condorcet discusses are the abolition of inequality between nations, the process of equality between nations, and the true perfection of mankind. I agree with Condorcet on the first two, but I do not agree that the human race can be perfect. I believe that the imperfection of the human race is what makes us human. If we were all the same, perfect in nature, then we would not be unique. The idea of a perfect society reminds me of the ideology behind Hitler and the Nazi regime. This obviously was not a healthy perspective. Very thought-provoking. So, you see here in the French Revolution this radical desire to transform human nature. And yes, indeed, I think that Hitlerism and Nazism, as we'll see later in the course, did partake of that as well. Group 3, you had laws passed by the National Convention forcing all the French people to mobilize for the war effort. Should the government have this much power? On this point, Kamaya had a good comment on national service. She said, in my opinion, I do believe that it should be voluntary. If the government did have the rights to force people to help out, I believe it should stop after a year or so, and then if someone would like to stay in, that would be their choice to do so. All right, so once again, our American individualism, I think, colors the way we see this. Really, all groups, I was very happy with your discussions. I think we can go even farther next module, but on the whole, I think you're making great progress toward perfection, as Condorcet might say. I was inspired by that. I was really inspired by the way that you handled these rather difficult and important documents of Western philosophy. Excellent job. Now, in Module 5 up ahead, we have Napoleon, the Latin American Revolutions, and the Industrial Revolution. Your documents deal with the Industrial Revolution. You'll have 3 questions on that topic to discuss and answer. And your third question, I think, may be a little more challenging activity than we've had so far, so I am looking forward to what you do with that. Finally, there aren't any extra assignments this time, but please don't forget that your next stage of the writing assignment is due at the end of Module 6. To that end, I would ask you to review the videos on MLA formatting I've put in a folder with that name in this module as needed. All right? Well, thanks for the great work, and I'm looking forward very much to your discussions and work in Module 5.